Joe Bustos is concerned about growth here in Mount Pleasant, infrastructure, and drainage, and that's why he's running again for Mount Pleasant Town Council. I sit down exclusively with Joe for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Joe Bustos, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Is it Gary Santos? That's you?
Or Joe Santos? Yeah.
No. I made a big mistake in that interview with Gary. He still gets on me about that.
It does it?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Well, you have to help him out every once in a while.
Right. That's right. Well, I need your help because obviously there's a lot going on in Mount Pleasant. But before Yes, sir. But before I get to that, I want to talk to you about you because obviously you have been making news at this recently. On your Facebook page, you said this quote, "It is official. I have filed to run for Mount Pleasant Town Council. We still have work to do to manage growth, create drainage, and build infrastructure. I would appreciate your vote on November 5th, 2019. Tell me, why Joe Bustos, why Mount Pleasant Town Council again?
Well, as I said, there's still some things to be done. I'm very pleased that all the things that I set out to do, we've done. We have permit allocation, we raised development impact fees, we have an apartment moratorium, and we got our short-term rental ordinance done. And those were all things that I set out to do. We still have a deficit of infrastructure. We need some roads and connections like 41 and 17. We definitely need drainage in the old part of Mount Pleasant and Snee Farm, Hobcaw, all those places in the older parts of Mount Pleasant. We still need to improve our drainage. In some areas, we don't even have drainage, so we need to do that.
Let me back up. You said roads. Mm-hmm. How many roads does Mount Pleasant need right now?
Well, Highway 41 is problematic. We have a lot of people living in Park West, Dunes West, Carolina Park, and those roads and the ability to get around need to be improved. Mm-hmm.
You talked earlier about short-term rentals. When did that become a problem for the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, when Charleston and the county started making theirs, and we were looking around at how many short-term rentals there were, as things usually happen, if it's controlled in one area and not in another, then there'll be a flood into the area where it's not controlled. So we thought it would be best to have a short-term rental ordinance on the books. And of course, we also wanted to protect a certain amount of the rentals for long-term rentals. So we put a cap on it. And the only way we could put a cap on it is to have an ordinance. Because if every ADU could be a short-term rental, we would literally squeeze all the long-term renters out of Mount Pleasant.
And how many amounts of rentals are you talking with that?
We're looking at capping the rentals in short-term rentals in Mount Pleasant at 1%, and we're estimating that's going to be about 420. So we have many more long-term rentals that are out there, but we don't want to lose that inventory of long-term rentals because then people would be squeezed out of the town altogether, especially for the affordable housing.
Affordable housing, how do you define that? Affordable housing or workforce housing?
Well, attainable housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, that's a moving target. It really is. And it's tough to have any in Mount Pleasant because our service workers literally have to travel from outside of town into town to work because they don't get paid enough to live inside the town. Even if we have some number of these rentals as long-term rentals, they're still hard for them to afford. So And I've said a number of times that businesses need to pay their folks a livable wage. It shouldn't be up to the town to hold rents down. They should pay them enough for their folks to be able to live and work in the town.
What is the average wage in the town of Mount Pleasant, in your mind?
For the service workers, it's somewhere between 7 and 10.
Okay.
And that's tough. That is tough to live in Mount Pleasant.
You talk about Mount Pleasant. How much work have you been able to do so far as managing growth?
Well, as I said, we have permit allocation, which we determined we were going to grow about 2.5% a year. Prices are still appreciating. The number of permits are being controlled. So we're not going to have a lot of empty houses sitting around.
Okay.
Which, last time when there was a downturn in the economy,
sure,
we didn't have a lot of empty houses sitting around where other towns did. And that was because permits were controlled.
How many permits are you talking right now?
A year?
Yes, sir.
About 800.
800, wow.
And that's still a lot of houses.
That's right. Let's say, for instance, 5-10 years from now, how many permits will you all allocate then?
Well, it's hard to say. I think in 10 years we're going to be built out. So then it's going to be replacement houses, and you see that going on a lot now.
Okay.
The older homes are being purchased and the houses torn down and new houses built on those lots. So we're seeing some of that now where they're being replaced. But we're thinking 5 to 10 years, the town's going to be built out. I mean, we're a peninsula. We're surrounded on 3 sides by water and Ondon.
Right.
So, we can only go so far. And then we're going to have to start redeveloping.
What's your plan for redeveloping?
Well, as I said, in our comprehensive plan is looking at that. There are going to be old strip malls that are going to be redeveloped. There are going to be old homes that are redeveloped. And, that's why we need reasonable infrastructure that can support that redevelopment.
What's your definition of reasonable infrastructure?
Well, in the old part of Mount Pleasant, we have no drainage, failing drainage, and poor drainage. We need to have drainage that is adequate to handle the amount of stormwater that we have. And we've done some things like change the buildable area on a lot down to 40%. And that keeps so much water from running out into the street and then down the street and into someone's yard. And that is still happening, and it's still a problem.
Let me talk to you about another problem, and this is from the Friends of Mount Pleasant on their Facebook page. They said this, quote, "Unfortunately, the Earl's Court Hotel project moves forward, which would not only desecrate the character of Mount Pleasant's old village, but infringe on the residents' ability to park near their homes, most of which people have lived in for decades." Question, what is the character of Mount Pleasant Old Village right now in your mind?
Well, in the Old Village Historic District, it's a wonderful place. People live there. They want to take care of their homes. They've made some large investments, and they should have a place to park.
And she went on to say this, and I don't know if this is any true or not, but she says this, quote, "Is the town going to allow the Old Village Hotel to be involved with a secret settlement?" She says this, quote, "A vague item appears to indicate that the town is poised to settle a pending lawsuit concerning the Earl's Court Hotel in the Mount Pleasant's historic Old Village. The agenda states that the council will meet behind closed doors in executive session for, quote, presentation in consideration of mediation at a settlement proposal related to the case 2018 CP 10 05560 2019 CP10 01723, 2019 CP10 01283. A Google search, she says, reveals that those three Charleston County court cases relating to the Earls Court and the town. This sounds eerily similar, she says, to the Midnight Massacre vote from 2 years ago to accept the settlement paving the way for 100,000 of really apartments at the Atlanta property on Ben Sawyer Boulevard. You also chimed in on this. You said this on your Facebook page, quote, I have been called by several residents asking about the Earls Court lawsuit that was decided last evening. Unfortunately, in my opinion, a majority of council voted to settle and allow the hotel to be built. The follow-on question was who voted how. The vote follows as follows. The vote was as follows: for Santos, Owens, Quintin, how do you pronounce his name? Quintin, Landing, and Bremer. Against was Bustos and Whitley. Mayor Haney recused himself because of the lawsuit against him by the developer. O'Rourke was out of town. How did we get here with the Earls Court situation?
Well, it was a series of lawsuits. The hotel goes back to 2011 when a previous administration had approved it. And fast forward now, I thought that they did not have vested rights, which means that they had the right to go ahead and build the hotel. And actually the entire council voted to appeal our own Board of Zoning Appeals decision to approve their vested rights. Our council voted unanimously to appeal that. So if it was successfully appealed, they would not have the vested rights to build the hotel. What we did is we heard a settlement offer that was brought in to us. And it's no secret I voted against it because I thought we should proceed with the appeal of the Board of Zoning Appeals decision.
Okay.
I think the judge should have decided whether we had that. I think we threw in the towel too soon. I think we should have said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to let it go to court. And if the judge says, hey, the law is on their side, I get it. But we don't know what he was going to say because we settled beforehand. So I feel that we broke faith. We established that we were going to go to the mat and appeal that Board of Zoning Appeals decision. And before it was rendered, before that decision was rendered by a judge, we threw in the towel. I think that was wrong.
Wrong. How many more questions do you have about this?
How many more questions do I have?
Yes,
well,
sir.
I suppose I have a lot of questions, but it's all moot now, as I understand it, because a majority of council voted to settle, and that's that.
Let me go back to what she said on the Friends of Mount Pleasant page. She says this: not only will it desecrate the character of Mount Pleasant's old village, but infringe on residents' ability to park near their homes. So what abilities will the residents have now that this has all been played out?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that a restaurant and 24 rooms in an inn, that there's going to be some spillover of parking into the neighborhoods. There's spillover parking from Shem Creek onto Live Oak Drive, Church Street. It's going to happen. People are going to come to visit people that's in the hotel or to join them for a meal, and there isn't going to be sufficient parking on the property. At least, did they meet the requirement, the requisite number of parking places? In the settlement, they said they were going to be able to put everything on the grounds of the hotel. But some people are going to park back in Earl's Court neighborhood. There are going to be people who are going to park out on the street because they don't want to park there.
Okay.
They want to leave soon after dinner. They'll say, let's park on the street, or let's go over here and park. There are going to be people who go to the hotel instead of having one car. Husband and wife are going to meet at the hotel because they were on trips separately, and they're going to have two cars. And what if everyone does that? And it's, I believe that there's going to be more parking done down in the neighborhood of the old village, and it's going to interfere with people's ability to park in front of their homes. A lot of these old homes don't have driveways or garages. You have to park on the street.
But then, what will be the character of the old village 5 years from now that this hotel is coming?
Well, I think it's going to change the character of that part of the old village, because it's not as the old village was. They're going to have these tall, thin houses. They're going to have an inn there that's going to be not of the same age and character as the old village.
Let me turn over to the Medal of Honor Museum.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the National Medal of Honor Heritage Center is one step closer in its transformation from its concept to concrete reality. And this is coming from Mutual News. The town of Mount Pleasant has joined Charleston County in an effort to help fund a landside Medal of Honor Museum that is slated to debut July 4th, 2023. On Tuesday night, August 13th, Mount Pleasant Town Council voted 8-0 to initially give $1.2 million to the Heritage Foundation. Why now?
Why now as opposed to
many years ago?
Many years ago. Okay. Well, actually,
yes,
we did earmark money to go to moving the road.
Okay.
I think it was around $2 million. Can't remember the exact number. And about $700,000 was spent to do the study of moving the road, Patriots Point Boulevard. Right. When the other folks left, that money was returned to Mount Pleasant. But we knew that there was a movement to have another Medal of Honor museum put together for Patriots Point. So what we did is we didn't put that money back into the coffers. We just held it.
Okay. So
when the time came, that's where we had the $1.2 million to give them initially, and then $600,000 a year for 5 years, for a grand total of $3 million. But the initial money was what we had for the road.
And it goes on to say this, obviously Tom O'Rourke was absent from the vote. Per request, $500,000 will go to the initiation of the Heritage Center's campaign, $700,000 that is, towards the corpus, and then $1.8 million will trickle in afterwards. Altogether, the town filed a pledge $3 million total, which will be dispersed over the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the council rendering its decision, Financial Committee Vice Chair Kathy Landing led off the discussion by recommending that council utilize the $1.2 million the town previously set aside in escrow to fund the road reallocation for last year. Then the town would come up with $1.8 million in installations until 2022, that is. But Bob Bremer, that is, initially rejected council's recommendation and suggested deferment after questioning the committee's planning and prioritization. Bremer, who clarified he's not opposed to the cost, basically says he's skeptical of the town's transparency by the Financial Committee, failing to further discuss what future initiatives may be at stake prior to making this contribution. So what are those future initiatives?
Well, I guess Bob Bremer's going to have to tell us that.
Okay.
He must have looked out and said, what if we use $1.8 million $600,000 a year for 5 years, something's going to come up short. Well, not necessarily, because when we do our budget, it's what we think we're going to get. Sometimes we get more. Well, generally, almost always we get more. We run an excess almost every year. So is anything going to be left out in the wind? I don't think so. But the way we do budgets, and we reprioritize things all the time. It may be that, I don't know, there may be something we decide not to buy, and we're going to have even more money left over. But I don't believe that by giving this money to the Medal of Honor Museum that we absolutely have to start cutting into anything. I think if we thought we had to do that, it would have been discussed. But we know that at every 6 months, we sit and reprioritize things. Sometimes we say we're going to have $1 million or $2 million for some particular thing, and that thing doesn't happen. So then that money goes back into the general fund. Sometimes we project how much money we're going to collect through property taxes, business license fees, and all those things, and we collect more. The best we can do is estimate and project what we're going to get. And that can be both on the overage and short. And if we're short, we have to go into a huddle and reprioritize, just like families do. If you counted on a bonus to take that vacation, and then you didn't get that bonus, you don't get to take the vacation.
And let me reread that again. It says, Councilmember Bob Bremer initially rejected the council's recommendation and suggested deferment after questioning the committee's planning and prioritization. Bremer, who clarified he's not opposed to the charitable cause, is skeptical of the town's transparency by the financial committee. How transparent is this financial committee?
Well, I think what he was saying is we didn't have a large discussion on where we would have to get money for this $600,000 per year. I think that's what he's saying.
Okay.
That we weren't being transparent because I'm on the finance committee. But the transparency will come at budget time when we have to look.
Okay.
And make no mistake about it. If this town didn't bring in the revenue that it was supposed to bring in, we would have to change the priorities. And quite honestly, all those, we might say we can't do $600,000 this year. We can only do $500,000.
Okay.
And that's within the realm of the possible. I mean, any budget in any department, if we don't meet the goals to collect taxes and fees and all those things, then we have to go back into the huddle and see how we're going to reprioritize.
Okay. Let me take you over to Coleman really quickly. Obviously, there's never debate about the Orchard Plaza right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think we already have all the psychic terrorism and all of that stuff. Obviously, there's a big discussion about donut holes and what's, jurisdictions and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain how we got here with that?
With the donut holes?
Yes, sir.
Well, the town of Mount Pleasant can't make anyone annex into the town. Property owner has to want to annex.
Okay.
Or they can, a subdivision can get together and do an election, and if they get, I think it's 75%, then 75% comes in and they kind of pull that other 25% along with them. And, there can be 100% where somebody owns 3 lots or whatever, and then they come. But the town of Mount Pleasant can't go to a business owner or a homeowner and say, you're contiguous, you have to come into the town of Mount Pleasant. We can't do that. So with the particular project that you just mentioned,
Yes,
Peach Orchard Plaza,
right.
The developer owns several parcels of land, and he wanted to build a storage facility, much like is over on Savannah Highway,
Right.
or St. Andrews Boulevard,
Yes, sir.
rather.
Yes, sir.
And, we just didn't want that on Coleman Boulevard. So, we were discussing it with them, and there was some back and forth, and there was no doubt that they could go to the county and get a permit to build that right now. And they could probably get additional height for their development. So we decided to negotiate with them, which we did, and they said they wanted the same thing that Moultrie Shopping Center and Sea Island Shopping Center received 45 feet on Coleman,
right,
and 55 feet behind.
Right.
So that is what we're going to offer them and do if we can. Now, I know people have been saying, oh, that's going to be so high. Well, we're not offering them or suggesting anything other than what we've already done.
And if they don't get what they want, then obviously they'll bypass you all and go to Charleston County.
Yeah. And right now they said they would build a streetscape that would go along with Coleman Boulevard in that area rather than storage units. So I think there's something good there for everyone. And 45 feet on Coleman and 55 feet behind it, just the same as was done on Moultrie Shopping Center and Sea Island Shopping Center. I don't see the downside of that.
Joe Bustos, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you, and I hope I see you after the election.
I'll be here to interview you.
Very good.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.